I'm gonna start. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our student panel. Today, we will be speaking upon the political importance of Jimmy Lai's fight for Hong Kong. He has fought for the freedom of Hong Kong, but that freedom is currently being suppressed due to his confinement. Today, we have this panel to discuss Jimmy's situation and how he's led Hong Kong to its freedom. Before we begin, let me introduce our panelists. I am the moderator for today's panel. My name is Jimena Ortiz, and I am a major in pre-nursing at Vanguard. Along with me today, we have our speakers who are also students here at Vanguard. Our first panelist is Henry, who is majoring in criminal justice. We have our second panelist, Ryan Williams, who is majoring in business administration. And our last panelist is Shrey, who is majoring in biomedical sciences. We hope you gain an understanding of his fight and the struggles he's made for Hong Kong to get to its freedom. So let's start off with the first question of who is Jimmy Lai and why is he important in this story? I'll hand it off to Henry.
Jimmy Lai was the founder of Apple Daily and the media tycoon. Jimmy Lai is a prominent Hong Kong entrepreneur and founder of Apple Daily, one of the most popular pro-democracy newspapers in Hong Kong. Through Apple Daily and other media ventures, Lai was a vocal critic of the Chinese Communist Party and the key figure in defending press freedom in Hong Kong.
Let's hear from Ryan.
Yeah, Jimmy Lai, he was a prominent Hong Kong businessman. He actually started a clothing company called Giordano. And funny story about Giordano is he actually stole the name from a pizza place that he visited when he was visiting the United States. And he just thought the Italian name sounded more like a good clothing brand than a Chinese name. So he started Giordano. He became very wealthy as a big hit in China, a really big clothing company. And then he eventually turned to media. And through his media, he was a really big threat to the Chinese Communist Party. The media company was very like kind of Western, and it spoke out a lot against the Chinese Communist Party and things that they were doing. So he faced a lot of threats and a lot of issues from the China in general and their whole government. And then he grew up really poor as an immigrant. And then through all of his business ventures and just a lot of things he did in his life, he was able to kind of gain that wealth through Giordano and then start a lot of other projects.
Okay. Shrey.
Yeah, so following up on what Ryan and Henry said, I think Jimmy Lay's story really stuck to me because it's not just about the politics, it's mainly about his own personal conviction. So he started his life in extreme poverty, as Ryan said. He worked in a sweatshop as a child and eventually became one of Hong Kong's most powerful entrepreneurs. So that alone in itself is pretty remarkable, but I mean, what's even more powerful is what he chose to do with his own success. So rather than protect his wealth or reputation, Lai actually became one of the loudest voices for democracy in Hong Kong. And at a time when speaking out was dangerous, when others had means of leaving, he stayed believing it was his own duty to fight for what he believed in. Yeah. He used Apple Daily as more than just a newspaper, of course. He turned it into a platform for his own resistance, one that gave the ordinary people hope and truth. And for that, he became a very, the global symbol of what it means to stand up for your own beliefs and no matter the cost, of course.
So I think what we can take from this is that Jimmy Lai isn't only important just for the founding of Apple Daily, but it's true that he did turn his life into a symbol of resistance for the democracy. But that also leads us to our second question of what did Apple Daily do that made it so important in Hong Kong? Go ahead, Henry.
I said Apple Daily was unique and influential in Hong Kong for several reasons. One being unapologetically pro-democracy. Apple Daily was openly critical of the Chinese government and strongly supported by Hong Kong's democracy movement. It gave a platform to voices that were often excluded from other mainstream media, especially those challenging the influence. And also investigative reporting and government scrutiny. Apple Daily conducted in-depth investigation into corruption, police misconduct, and government overreach. It played well as a watchdog role, holding authorities accountable with other media outlets were unwilling or unable to.
Go ahead, Ryan.
I really like what Henry was saying there. And Apple Daily, one of the things about it is it appealed to everyday people, not just the elites. So it really kind of the people liked it a lot, right? Because if it was not just for the rich people in China, it felt more like accessible to the middle class and lower class people of Hong Kong. And then it really exposed corruption in China. It had a pro democracy voice. It openly supported protests and democratic reforms, which is something really rare in Hong Kong's media landscape because of the Chinese government. It was really bold and colorful. They tried to make it kind of Western, right? Like the Western newspapers, which was pretty uncommon at the time, right? They tried to make it really like kind of out there and easy to see, and they were trying to get their ideas spread out to everybody. And then they really openly supported protests, which was definitely frowned upon by the Chinese government. They really encouraged everyone to go kind of fight for what they thought was right. And it stood as proof that free press could still survive even under pressure during from the Chinese government. Um, and then when it was not when the paper closed in 2021, thousands of Hong Kongers lined up overnight to buy its final issue, which showed kind of how important it was to the people and how big of an influence the paper really had.
Hmm. Okay, Trey.
Yeah. So, like Ryan was saying, Apple Daily wasn't just another media outlet. It was really just the voice of the people altogether, because it took on stories that others were afraid to touch and, challenge the powerful directly head on. So, in a city where fear was spreading and free speech was obviously shrinking, Apple Daily refused to be silenced throughout all of that. And what also made it special was its role as, a kind of a cultural memory. It documented protests, arrests, and the stories of students and activists as well. And those are obviously things that can easily have been like erased. So the preservation of the actual truth mattered to them. And the paper also gave momentum to the movement itself. It didn't just report on the resistance, but it also amplified it, meaning people were inspired to act and speak out because Daily or Apple Daily made them feel seen. And I guess the best part of the legacy of Apple Daily altogether was, despite the public support and massive readership, it was eventually obviously shut down almost overnight, very instantaneous. And it shows just how vulnerable a free press can be in a society, even though the society thought it was protected from it altogether. Yeah.
So since Apple Daily gave people a voice, it really showed the freedom of press. But that leads to our other question of why is freedom of press essential for democracy? Go ahead.
Freedom of press is essential for democracy because it ensures that people have access to truthful, diverse, and independent information. And I give a few points why. One being that keeping the government accountable. A free press investigates and exposes wrongdoing, corruption, and abuse of power. It also helps prevent authoritarianism by keeping leaders in check and informing the public about the government actions. Another one being protecting individual rights. Journalists often highlight violations of human rights, social injustice, and minority voices. By doing so, the press supports equality, transparency, and fairness in society.
Brian?
I Just to kind of piggyback back off of what Henry was saying, freedom of the press is really important for democracy because it ensures ordinary people can be heard, right? You don't just hear about the political figures or like famous figures, just regular people are able to kind of get their voice out there. Um, it also encourages debate. It kind of lets different viewpoints be out in the media, let people kind of see things from multiple sides instead of just kind of one side, it being like a one-sided affair, right? We get to hear all kinds of different arguments, all kinds of different walks of life and what their thoughts on certain issues are. It also helps to educate citizens. When we have like limited press, right? It's not free press. It kind of gives the opportunity for the government or somebody to kind of like limit what you're seeing. You don't get to see like kind of different sides. They get to really just kind of shove their one viewpoint at you, and you don't get to get kind of the full picture of everything. Um, it also can protect human rights. A free press can help bring attention to abuses and injustices. And if free press is lost, then democracy kind of turns into dictatorship because people will only hear what the government has to say.
Thank you. Shrey.
Yeah, so what I think is important to highlight is like press freedom is something that we often take for granted in America until, it's fully gone. So Jimmy La's story is a reminder that a free press it isn't just a nice idea. It's really the foundation of a society and an honest one for that. So one thing that really stood out to me is that the freedom of the press often depends on the individuals being willing to take real risks. So Jimmy Lay didn't really have to keep speaking out, obviously, but he did, even knowing the consequences of that. And I mean, that kind of courage is rare, but it's also essential in order to keep democracy and free press, obviously, yeah. So democracy isn't just something we inherit and keep automatically, and it really takes vigilance. And I guess journalism is definitely one of the most effective tools we have to expose injustice and protect rights, as Ryan was saying. And yeah, lastly, I think Lay's story teaches us that sacrifice itself can be contagious, and his actions will obviously continue to inspire new generations to speak up, further adding to free press. So yeah, even when it's dangerous, I guess Jimmy Lay
Okay.
does a really good of way of doing that. Yeah.
Okay. So basically, without freedom of press, democracy cannot survive because, well, people would lose their authority, like of the ability to question the authority. But that also leads us to our question of what challenges did Jimmy face because of his beliefs? Go ahead.
Jimmy Lai faced several serious challenges because of his pro-democracy beliefs and outspoken criticism of the Chinese government. One example being the multiple arrests and legal charges he got. Lei was arrested several times, especially after the 2020 national security law was introduced in Hong Kong. He faced charges including collusion with foreign forces, unauthorized assembly, and other political motivated offenses. And also the shutdown of Apple Daily. In 2021, Hong Kong authorities froze Apple Daily's assets, raided its offices, and arrested top editors. This led to the forced closure of the newspaper, silencing one of the last major pro-democracy voices in the media.
Ryan.
Yeah, Jimmy Lai, he faced a ton of challenges throughout his time. Like Henry was talking a lot about his arrests and trials. He was repeatedly arrested from the national security law, which really had a vague kind of wording that was meant to be able to kind of arrest a lot of people and kind of limit the free speech that we were talking about before. It was the whole law was very vague and kind of opened him up to a lot of trouble. He spent years in prison awaiting trial, facing possibly life sentences for collusion. They raided his Apple Daily office multiple times. One time they showed him actually like being arrested and then being marched through the building, kind of as a way to humiliate him. They said he had handcuffs and he was chained up, and that was just a way to kind of humiliate him for all the good things he was doing, but all the things he was doing against the Chinese government. He was also had a lot of financial pressure. They froze all of his assets. His businesses were crippled. And I think like him sticking in Hong Kong, even after the laws were passed, even with all the wealth that he had, knowing that he was going to be in trouble, him sticking around was just like a really, it shows how important of a figure he was. He also lost many of his allies, many of his colleagues and fellow activists left Hong Kong after these laws were passed, and he still decided to stay. And lastly, I think the psychological toll that it'll take facing years in prison for really just kind of doing what you thought was right. I can't imagine the pain for his family and him, and just how difficult that must all be.
Shrey.
Yeah, so to wrap it all together, obviously the challenges he faced were enormous. So he lost his freedom, company, financial assets, and basically his entire public voice. But I mean, again, he refused to compromise throughout all of that. What's even more unsettling is that his story is part of a larger trend. I think Henry brought this up earlier. It's the actual global rise of authoritarianism at that time, where governments are finding new ways to silence dissent while pretending to play by their own legal rules. What also made his struggle harder was the lack of a strong international response. Obviously, there were statements from other countries, but they were either too little or too late, and it shows how silence can enable repression. And at the same time, Jimmy Lay's case proves the importance of global solidarity as a whole. His courage invites the rest of us to care, even if we're obviously not from Hong Kong, because freedom isn't really local. It should be a shared global responsibility. And that was my take on it. Yeah.
Well, since he was imprisoned because of his fight for freedom, how was the fight for democracy shown in this film? Go ahead, Henry.
The film showed the fight for democracy in Hong Kong through powerful storytelling and real life footage, and it was showed through Jimmy Lay's personal journey. The film follows Jimmy Lay's transformation from a wealthy businessman to a committed pro-democracy activist. His personal sacrifices, including imprisonment and the loss of his newspaper, reflect the high cost of standing up to an authoritarian rule. It also included raw footage of the 2019 Hong Kong protests, showing millions of people marching for freedom, as well as the police violence and government suppression that followed. These scenes highlighted the courage of ordinary citizens and the growing risk they face.
Let's hear from Ryan.
One of the first things that the film showed was the Tiananmen Square, and that's when kind of Jimmy decided to start like speaking out and fighting for democracy. And this was a little bit before the whole Hong Kong thing, but in Hong Kong they showed all these protests. They had multiple films where millions are marching, or multiple moments where millions were marching. At one point, there was, I think, 2 million active protesters, and Hong Kong has a population of 7.4 million. So that just shows like how kind of involved the people were with everything. They also showed police brutality. They saw tear gas, rubber bullets, just kind of like assaulting many of the protesters. And even when the for a while the protesters were nonviolent, right? They tried to just kind of keep it a peaceful protest. Eventually there was a smaller group that was fighting back a little bit, but for the most part they were nonviolent protesters, and the police were using these extreme means to help kind of get rid of the protests. They also kind of talked about the national security law, which is just kind of a way to get rid of all this democracy, get rid of the fight for democracy, right? It was a way to kind of imprison the leaders that were fighting for democracy on kind of ridiculous charges because the law was so vague. And they also like threatened the safety of Jimmy Lai and his family and his kids. They were talking about how his kids faced threats. So there were a lot of kind of just not okay things that they were doing to help or to kind of get rid of democracy in Hong Kong.
Shrey.
Yeah, so one thing I personally loved about the film is it makes like the watchers obviously reflect on their own comfort zones. So watching Jimmy Lai go to prison for standing up for what he believed was right, kind of forces us to ask, what would I do in that situation? Would I be willing to take that same risk? It also shows that the fight for democracy doesn't really stop at borders, and it's a shared value that requires a shared response altogether. And the film pushes us to realize that what's happening in Hong Kong could also happen anywhere, really, and that we have a role to play even from afar. So, what moved me the most was seeing how Lai kept speaking the truth, even when it meant obvious consequences. He didn't want to play it safe. He wasn't. There wasn't really any calculated moves on his, and it was just him living out his own values. And yeah, finally, the film challenges our definition of success. Jimmy Lai could have lived a comfortable life, but he chose his own meaning over safety. And yeah, I think that's very respectable. Yeah.
Great. So since the film shows Jimmy's like fight through like his personal belief, I guess I don't know how to word this, like his fight is shown through his journey, and like the protests show like he was not like backing down for what he believed in. So I guess our final question is, what can we learn from Jimmy Lai's story about standing up for what you believe in? Go ahead, Henry.
Jimmy Lai's story teaches us powerful lessons about courage, conviction, and the cost of standing up for what you believe in, especially when facing powerful opposition. And a perfect example could be standing up comes with sacrifice. Lay risked and lost his freedom, business, and safety for the cause of democracy. His story shows that standing up for your beliefs often means making difficult, even painful sacrifices. Another one is being any person can make a big impact. Despite being just one individual, Lay's actions inspired a movement and gave people hope and drew international attention to Hong Kong's struggle. It also reminds us that individual courage can challenge powerful systems. Another one can be freedom is also not guaranteed. Lay's experience shows that even in modern societies, freedoms like speech and press can disappear quickly under authoritarian pressure. His story is a warning and a reminder to defend democratic values wherever you live.
Okay, Ryan.
I really liked how Henry was talking about how the individual can do so much for the movement. Jimmy Lai, I can't imagine what would happen or like how little we would have known about this if Jimmy Lai had not sacrificed so much to kind of get it out there. He did so much organizing protests and the media and all that, and even as just one person, he made such a huge difference in the movement. Another point is that he used his faith. I believe in the film they showed him getting baptized, and I think his wife was a devout Catholic. And then, kind of later into it, he became more religious and leaned on his faith to kind of give him the strength to face everything he was dealing with, and that's a really important part of it. And then just the persistence, right? He never gave up. You know, they're freezing all of his money. He worked so hard. He could have just left Hong Kong, lived kind of a wealthy life and just a nice life wherever, but he decided to stay in Hong Kong and kind of fight for what he was believing in. He risked all of his friends; they're all gone. He left. They took his money. It doesn't matter. He kept fighting for what he believed in.
Shrey.
Yeah. So, I mean, I believe there's a lot we can learn, but what sticks with me the most personally is that integrity itself means making hard choices. And it doesn't mean just saying the right things because Jimmy Lai chose principle over, privilege. He knew what it might cost him and he did it anyways, even though he had all of these great stuff going for him, a lot of assets. But yeah, his bravery shows us that courage itself is contagious and that people follow examples. And Lay's example gives permission to others, especially the younger generations, to speak out even when, it's risky. There's obvious consequences to it. And it also reminds us that freedom itself isn't inherently passive. It requires action. It isn't just something that you get. And Lay didn't wait for someone else to defend democracy. He did it himself and he did it publicly and faced all the consequences that came with it. Lastly, I think Lay's faith played a powerful role, as Ryan said, in his own resistance. It wasn't just, political conviction, it was both spiritual and personal. And that deeper sense of purpose also gave him the strength to stand firm when others gave up. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, Henry, Ryan, and Shrey, for your insights. As we've seen today, Jimmy Lai's story is about the fight for freedom, justice, and human dignity. His courage shows that even in the face of huge pressure, one person can stand up for many and inspire them. Even though Jimmy Lai's future is uncertain, we hope his story encourages all to hold on to hope and stand up for what we believe in. Thank you all for listening.